Magandang araw po sa lahat. I am Ariel A. Paler, Division Learning Facilitator of Surigao del Sur, and we will be talking about formative assessment and recording methods in remote learning. Learning autonomy is important in distance learning, but also in the classic learning environment. However, many children, particularly younger children, may not yet have developed sufficient autonomy for self-learning. According to UNICEF in the year 2020, children cannot and should not be expected to learn and progress across the intended curriculum through self-learning methods with few interactions from teachers. Kaya naman, napakahalaga po na mabalikan natin ang pamamaraan sa assessment at recording para mas ma-assess natin ang kagalingan ng ating mga mag-aaral at para makapagbigay tayo ng epektibong tugon sa kanila. At the end of this session, we will be able to first identify the different formative and recording methods in remote learning. Second, discuss the different assessment methods to be used in distance learning. And lastly, shared practices in assessing and recording learners' progress. As challenges thrive in the pandemic, we need to rethink of possible ways in order to better capture our learners' progress. So we need to look up formative assessment methods that are truly responsive to our situation. As we all know that assessment methods are the ways you gather evidence of our learners' progress over time. These are the common assessment methods that we can use in distance learning. These are observation, talking to learners, analysis of learners' products, and tests. And these methods vary according to the needs and types of our learners. No single method is applicable to all students. Ibig sabihin, bawat bata ay iba't iba ang pamamaraan na kanilang kailangan depende sa kanilang pangangailangan. One size fits all strategy could never become acceptable. One type of formative assessment method is observation, wherein teacher make formal and informal observations of the learner's performance or behaviors based on assessment criteria. In an instance, tingnan natin ang pattern ng performance ng isang bata sa bawat linggo. Tumaas ba o bumaba? Pag hindi consistent ang results, may problema yan. Halimbawa, kung hindi medyo matataas ang marka ng isang bata from the previous school year, tapos biglang tumaas ang grado in this time of pandemic, siguro ay dapat na tingnan natin ito. Pag okay naman from the previous years, tapos biglang bumaba ngayon, then dapat din natin bigyan ito ng pansin. These are practical observations in distance learning that we need to see from each of our learners. Paano natin masimulan ang ganitong observation? Una, let us ask the previous teachers, saan ba sa mga batang ito ang magaling sa klase? At sino ang hindi masyado? When we group them together, may basis na tayo kung paano natin obserbahan ang mga bata. Kailangan nating makilala ang ating mga bata kahit distance learning dahil una, anong silbi ng malalaki ang kanilang mga scores sa assessment pero wala pala silang natutunan kasi wala silang naintindihan dahil kinokopya lang ang mga answer key. Thus, observation is really necessary. Observation can be spontaneous or informal. It could be planned also or formal, and it can be done before, during, or even after the lesson. Examples of when to use this method is conduct random interviews through different ways and observe patterns of responses. So dito ay nasasagot ang mga tanong na paano siya sasagot sa mga tanong. We can also have this home visitation to make it formal and observe home conditions. So dito ay mas nakilala, mas naintindihan at nasasagot ang mga tanong tulad ng ano ang nasa paligid ng tahanan ng mga mag-aaral, meron ba o wala bang suporta na naibibigay ng magulang. And lastly, assess behavioral patterns through learning response of individuals such as study and work, habits, and performance. Dito ay nasasagot ang mga tanong tulad ng interesado ba siya sa lesson, on time ba nag-submit at kumukuha ng last, or even consistent ba ang performance from previous years to present years. The next type of formative assessment method is talking to learners, wherein teachers talk and question learners to gain insights on their understanding and progress. This is often referred as conferencing in whatever means and modalities. Talking of learners or conferences can be spontaneous or planned, formal or informal. It can be done before, during, or after the lesson, and it even encourages individual learners to talk about their learning as they answer open-ended questions. Examples of when to use the method is when learners do not understand the lesson. So dito ay nasasagot kung naintindihan ba niya ang module, nakukuha ba niya ang hinihingi ng gawain. And this can be done through call and text, messenger, teleconferencing, and even home visitation. Talking to learners can best be done through home visitation. What is the purpose of our home visitation? Of course, we're going to gather data, assessment and monitoring of formative performance, assess learners, provide intervention. Baka bigay tayo ng bigay, wala palang natutunan ng bata. So napakasayang. Ang vision natin dito is ayaw natin masayang ang efforts natin dahil nagtuturo tayo. So that is why we need to talk to our learners so that we better understand them, and we can have this through home visitation. Kung wala kasing natutunan ang bata sa ating binibigay sa kanila, then the bottom line is wala tayong naituro, and we don't want that to happen. The other type of formative assessment method is analysis of learners' products, wherein teacher judge the quality of products created by learners according to agreed upon criteria. Kailan natin masasabing may natutunan na ang bata? When we see a progressive output or product. Analysis of learners' products can be a planned formal assessment and usually done during and after a lesson, and used to assess learners' attainment from standards and competencies. And we can have analysis of learners' products through essays and written tasks for all learning areas, worksheets, projects, models, artworks, and even multimedia presentation. When we require now outputs or products from learners, actually we are already doing summative assessment. But take note, once the product needs improvement and there is a need for revision because the output is not good or hindi nagpapakita ng kasanayan, then that will go back to formative decision. This is the time to decide if we will give extension and supplemental activities for learners to cope up. Tandaan natin na competency should be mastered, and we don't need to proceed to the next competency if a certain competency is not mastered. Anong saysay ng pag-move natin kung sa unang competency hindi na naintindihan ng bata? The last type of formative assessment method is test. This is to determine learners' ability to demonstrate mastery of a skill or knowledge and understanding of content. Tests are usually planned and formal assessment. It can be done before, during, or after a lesson in oral, written, or practical form. This can include also many test items like a multiple choice, true or false, matching type, extended writing, and usually it used to test not just recall but also higher cognitive domains. And content tests and quizzes are formative in nature. This is the basis of learners where to able to get the content standards. Summative assessment is captured when levels of skills development and application of knowledge and skills are being measured. But when levels of skills development and application of knowledge and skills are low as measured in the test, then it will become formative, that is subjected for further decisions. We must understand that our learning activity sheets are formative in nature. Activities and assessments in the last should not be used in grading but used in decision making. There is a disparity on the results of the grades of our learners. yung grado nila sa bawat learning area ay actually masyadong mataas, pero ang nakuha sa exit assessment ay masyadong mababa. Isang findings doon, ang weekly formative assessment ang pinagbabasihan ng grado ng karamihan, which basically not. So, yung practice natin sa pag-determine ng grade ay kailangang i-upgrade natin ng kaunti. In assessing the proficiency of our learners, it must be noted that our assessment must anchored on the 6 cognitive process dimensions. The Bloom's taxonomy of learning allowed us to design assessment that would scaffold learners to the desired proficiency level as prescribed by the different competencies. When we are going to assess, even in formative assessment, it should be congruent to the competency requirements prescribed in Bloom's taxonomy. Kailangan nating i-assess kasi ang bata ayon sa competency requirement. In our LAS, if the competency requires evaluating, then our activities or assessment must be in evaluating. If the competency is analyzing, then the activities and assessment must be analyzing. Like for example, a certain competency which describe visual object, yet the formative assessment is the students are going to color the object. So paano nasusukat ngayon ng pagkulay ang pangangailangan na makilala ng bata ang isang bagay? So kailangang pantay ang inaasahan at ang ipapagawa sa mga bata. As you assess, you should record evidence of how well each learner has demonstrated its criterion. Kailangan nating tandaan that formative assessment performance is not the basis of grades. It is a basis for instructional improvement. Again, we would like to remind all the teachers that all the activities in the LAS are formative. Therefore, it is not the basis of grade. Results are recorded but not graded. The first formative recording method is the student weekly formative tracking, wherein it consists of the parts like the subject area, the grade level, learner's name, specific competency, result of formative assessment, the percentage of the result, and then the students can be classified to the proficiency level, either not proficient, low proficient, nearly proficient, proficient, or even highly proficient. And it includes also the intervention strategies provided and the date it is being provided. Kailangan nating matrack na sa bawat linggo ang performance ng bawat bata dahil dito natin nakikita ang kanyang progress bawat linggo at dito din natin makikita kung may karagdagang tulong na kanyang kinakailangan. Dito nakikita natin ilang porsyento ang nakukuha ng bawat bata sa formative assessment bawat linggo. At dito din natin makikita kung sino ang mga batang kailangan ng mag-move on sa susunod na competency at kung sino pa yung kinakailangan pa ng karagdagang oras. The second formative recording method is the individual learner's intervention and monitoring plan. This is being given or being used after the student weekly formative tracking. In this plan, we can see the learner's name, the grade level, the learning area, the learner's needs or specific competency, the intervention strategies provided, the monitoring date, learner status, if it is in significant progress or showing significant progress or even mastery. So those nearly proficient to below proficient will be placed here in our ILIMP. Let us be clear that we will give reinforcement to nearly proficient, remediation to below proficient, and intervention to not proficient. Itong monitoring date natin is kailangang ma-specify natin ilang araw ba ang ibibigay natin sa bata for the RRA activities. So, 2 days ba o 3 days para matapos ang interventions? And within that day, kailangan na ma-monitor natin. Pag sinasabing monitor, na-contact natin ang mga bata in whatever platform at ma-assist natin ang kanyang mga sagot sa mga materials. That is where teaching happens, when we assess our learners specifically in the difficult areas of the lesson. When we see the progress now, then we will move to the next level. The last formative recording method is the formal and informal anecdotal records. These are objective narrative records of learners' performance, the strengths, the needs, the progress, and the behavior. In the notebook or journal, we can assign a page for each learners in our class. We can write narratives about the learners on his or her page. So when preparing anecdotal records, teacher must recognize the groups of their students according to proficiency level. We can classify our learners if who are those proficient, sino ang below proficient, at sino yung not proficient. When she knows that this group of learners being in below and not proficient, so handa na si teacher sa ganitong uri ng mga bata at handa na siya sa kung ano ang ibibigay or ano ang maaari niyang gawin in that particular week for that particular students. Pag nagka-problema, alam na ni teacher kung ano ang solusyon kasi kilala niya ang kapasidad at kung paano ito mabigyan ng angkop na solusyon. So in a formal or informal anecdotal record, we can have the strength, the areas for growth, and for the progress. Again, for formative recording methods, we can have the student weekly formative tracking, the individual learners intervention and monitoring plan, and the formal and informal anecdotal records. So these are the three basic recording methods in formative assessment that will help teachers determine appropriate actions to his learners. When this will be captured in the classroom, the teacher can now design appropriate feedback as well to help their learners. Let me end my talk with this quote from John Carlos S.J. that we think too much about effective methods of teaching and not enough about effective methods of learning. This session may open up our minds that assessment, especially formative, truly plays a vital role in teaching learning process. May we always remember that the best way to help learners in this remote learning is to guide them in the beginning so that they can endure education in their lifetime. I hope I impart something to you which you can use as you take your journey in assessing your learners. Thank you and keep safe.